Hello my friends and welcome back to Milo's Farm. It has been a minute, a few months actually, but today I am coming to you with a video that has been very widely requested on my social media. I have done a few reels about this, but a lot of people really want to know my process and how I go about baking bread. So today's video, the return to YouTube video, is going to be all about bread making in your homestead. So I did actually make a video, my process and how I go about, pulling the dough together and baking and all that kind of stuff last August, but I had just finished with the spicy flu and it was probably a little bit nasal, a little bit challenging to hear what I was saying and just sort of follow along. And I actually didn't really make the video specifically for YouTube as in, a properly produced video. I actually made it for my mum so that my mum could, follow along at home because she lives in another state. So I have been wanting to redo this video for a while and I thought today would be the perfect time to do it because I am going to make some bread today. So if you're interested in seeing my process, stick around because I will go through all the gear that I use, the books, the recipes, how I go through and knead different things, what my process is, and show you the final product. So today I'll be making a boule, half kilo boule, and then I'll also show you how you can use the dough to make smaller rolls if you want. To start with, I wanted to talk about the two baking bread books that I use and that I purchased when I started on my bread making journey. So I kind of set myself a little goal each year. This year it was to make cheese. I have not made cheese yet. I'm gonna have to get onto that if I want to, get to my goal target this year. But last year, I think or the year before, I set myself a goal to really perfect just a really simple bread. So, you can always whip up quick bread and all that kind of thing, but I really wanted to nail the skill down. So I did a lot of reviews on which books were sort of recommended as the best. I was on Reddit, I was on social media, in other homesteading groups to see what people were using. And I found the following two books the most recommended. So the first one is Tartine, and the second one is Flour, Water, Salt, Yeast. So Tartine is a fantastic book, beautiful book. If you have Amazon or if you have a wish list on a book website, please make sure you add both of these books. They both have their benefits in different ways because they are such good books. This book is written a little bit more like a sort of story, how the author, Chad Robertson, who's the baker, how he sort of wanted to go and make bread and make it so that it's easy and make the recipes so it's easy for home cooks and amateur bakers to get into baking. So it is a beautiful book, and probably the first sort of lot of it is all about, the story behind it, and it tells you that story. But there's also lots of different pictures to show you the techniques and stuff. So I found this book really more focused on if you're wanting to go down the sourdough route and do specialty breads and rich doughs like brioche and the like. So this is a good book, but I find that if I'm doing something specific to sourdough or specific to a brioche or something like that, then I grab this. When I purchased this book, I was using the recipes from Tartine in the beginning, and not that I found it difficult, I just felt that it was like so many steps, and I just didn't probably have the same enjoyment. As I said, great book, fantastic book, lots of great reviews, but for me personally, I just found Flour, Water, Salt, Yeast was much better. This book has multiple different techniques, so you can learn about not only sourdough and creating your own levain and that kind of stuff, but also using things like a poolish to get into bread baking, or how to do sort of really easy breads without levains. So I actually think this book is much better for beginners, because I think what's happening, at least from what I've seen in some of the sort of bread making subreddits and stuff, is people buy Tartine and then go from not baking to trying to bake sourdough overnight. And what happens is most of the time you might succeed or you won't. And there's so many variables that can impact a sourdough and that can impact your starter and that can impact, how wet your dough is, how dry your dough is, how easy it is to handle. Everything from the weather to, how warm it is in your house to, the quality of the flour, all of that comes into play. And it comes into play with this book too. I just find this one is a lot more beginner friendly, and at least the beginner recipes that you do use. For example, I think there's one called the Saturday overnight or the Saturday day bread, which is the recipe I'm making today. That one is really quite forgiving. So if you do mess up, for example, if you do put a little bit more yeast, it's not going to matter. This book doesn't use any yeast in any of the recipes. This one progresses you up. So you start off with 3 or 4 recipes that have a yeast in them, so that you can sort of, you know, get the rise and learn how to shape the dough and learn how to handle the dough. Then it goes into using things like tangzongs and Polish, which, you know, kind of mimic what a sourdough starter would be like, but, you know, using it to bake. And then it goes into using levain. So I actually think for a beginner, the recipe that I'm making today is the Saturday white bread. I make this all the time. It is very, very easy to pull together. Recently I've actually been testing putting it together and not letting it necessarily have that, 5-6 hour you know, fermenting time, I suppose you could call it, retard time. And I made it, for example, last week, and after the second rise, straight away shaped it and baked it, and it was totally fine. I've actually still got a little bit of the bread here. So that's what I like about this book and these recipes. Now that we've gone through the books and what my plans are for the recipe, I'll quickly show you some of the things that you need and some of the things that you don't need. Now, again, if you're new to bread making, bread baking, you know, it's up to you whether or not you want to invest in some of those kits. I know on Amazon you've got some of those kits where you get, you know, the blade, you get the dough hook, you get a few other bits and pieces, you get a banneton and whatever. That's fine. You know, they're not expensive. They're 30-40 bucks for a set. You can invest in one of those. I didn't. It doesn't make any difference. You can use a colander, for example, as a banneton, or you can use, you know, other things around the place if you need to. So there is no, you know, you don't have to go and buy all that sort of specialty stuff, but if you want to, you're more than welcome to. It's not going to change the way you make your bread. There's still other ways around it. Let's get to it. The reason these recipes are also so good is you don't need a stand mixer. So not everyone has a stand mixer, and I know that for some people they are very expensive, and maybe one of those types of kitchen purchases where you sort of think, oh, is that something I'm going to use all the time or not? I've had one for many, many years. I use it sometimes when I'm sort of, you know, in a rush or have other things on to pull sort of all the ingredients together. Not all the time though, because it's just as easy to do it by hand. So I wanted to show you what I use each time. So obviously you'll need scales. You'll need one of these dough hooks. These are fantastic. They're so good. My mum actually got me this and sent it to me, so thank you, Mum. You need a Dutch oven. This is one I've had for many, many years. It's not a fancy one. I don't know where I bought it from, maybe Target, maybe the op shop, not 100% sure, but it wasn't expensive, and I only use this for bread. And I do use my KitchenAid bowl and lid just because it's easier to use, you know, because I can put a lid on and chuck it in the fridge. If I do make dough and don't get to bake that day, I can chuck it in the fridge. So I want to talk to you about that a little bit later too. Now, in terms of the ingredients, all you need for this recipe is flour, water, salt, and yeast, which is fantastic. I do buy specialty flour, and I want to talk about why I choose to buy specialty flour, and I also do use a high quality salt. So it's up to you whether you want to just use, you know, whatever you can sort of get your hands on, but the place where I buy my flour, I actually end up getting the flour, specialty flour, French flour, and specialty baking flour for breads. I actually get it for about $3.50 a kilo, a bag, which is, you know, probably comparable to what you'd pay in a supermarket these days. So the company I use is called Basic Ingredients. This is not sponsored at all. I just love this company and I love their flours. I use an imported French flour, T45, or I use a Brero flour to make my bread. It depends. If I want to make something really sort of more on that kind of chewy, sourdoughy texture, or focaccia or something like that, I might revert to the Brero because it's a stronger flour. The T45 is a very soft flour. It's a flour that's predominantly used for baking cakes, muffins, that kind of stuff, but I've been using it to bake bread and it's fantastic. You need a good yeast. I just use this baker's yeast that I get from the company where I buy my flour from, and water and salt. So at the moment I'm using French mineral salt, and that is beautiful. The bread turns out amazing in it. And yeah, that's basically it. So I'm going to put everything together, weigh everything up, put it in the container, and then actually show you what the next step is. Okay, so now that I've put everything together, I'll quickly just run through. So the recipe calls for 720 grams of water weighed, a kilo of flour, 21 grams of fine sea salt, and 4 grams of yeast. That's all you need. Let's quickly talk about hydration in dough. This would be considered a 72% hydration dough. What that means is the hydration level is the amount of water or liquid in your dough and your final batter. Obviously something like a pizza dough, like a quick pizza dough, will probably be about 40 or 50% because you have less water in it, right? So a dough like that does need to be put on your stand mixer using a dough hook or hand kneaded to really get that gluten developed. High hydration doughs are tricky, a little bit trickier to work with. They're a lot wetter, but I find them much nicer afterwards in terms of the final product. So there is a few other things that you might come across. Now, again, this is my experience. This doesn't necessarily reflect every other baker. You know, you're gonna have people telling you, oh, I do this, I do that, it works for me. It might not work for you. So you really do need to, if you are new to bread or are new to starting to bake, really go step by step and really, you know, look at everything that you've done. What temperature was it today? You know, what temperature was the water? What was this? What was that? All of that stuff has an impact. So for example, you use warm water in your, you know, when you're pulling it together. Not hot because you don't want to burn the yeast, just warm water. Another thing that comes up a lot in discussions when baking bread is, you know, pre-warm your oven. Yes, that's correct, but also pre-warm your vessel. I do not pre-warm my Dutch oven whatsoever. I've not found that it has an impact on my dough whatsoever. It is up to you whether or not you find that you need to test it out. Next time you do a bake, you know, bake one with, you know, the Dutch oven preheated, and the time after, bake it without. And if it doesn't make a difference, well then you know, you don't have to do that extra step. The other thing, for example, is a lot of the times recipes will say to add the salt later. I've added the salt later after I've pulled the first 3 ingredients together, and I've added it at the beginning, and it's made absolutely no difference. Again, if that's a step that I can cut out or shorten in my bread making process, then that's what I do. So there is a few things like that that you will come across, and you're going to have one school of thought that sort of, you know, pushes one way, and you'll have another school of thought that pushes another way. Again, it's up to you. Test it out and see what works for you, what works in your oven, what works in, you know, with the temperature. Today's not going to be super, super hot, but it's definitely warming up. So once I pull this together, we'll chuck this outside on the veranda and just let it start, you know, rising and getting up there. So now I'm going to show you, because I've put everything together. Now I'm going to show you, it's a little bit hard to see, how to use the dough hook to actually get this going. Okay, hopefully you can see this. So that's what it looks like. So what I do is do this. Now, one thing that happens, because I bulk buy all my flour, I actually freeze my flour. So I try, and if I know I'm going to bake, I try and take it out a good 24 hours before from the freezer to make sure that, you know, all the sort of little bits are not clumpy. I found that when I have baked without doing so, bread, then it doesn't turn out. If you're just going to do it for, you know, like a quick pizza or something, yeah, that's fine, doesn't matter. But when you're doing a bread, then it can be a little bit challenging. All right, so can you see that? So all I do is I sort of mix the top to begin with to get a bit of a wet batter. And then I tip this on an angle because this bowl is so deep. And I just make sure I pull it up and mix it in. So see the dough is very, very shaggy. Very, very not put together. I don't want it to be. It's going to come together when I do the rest of the process. All right, so this is just more to make sure that, you know, all the flour and the yeast and water is mixed together. So it's also a good idea to keep a bottle of water nearby to clean your dough hook, but also to clean your hands, because this dough is pulled together without machines. It is pulled together without kneading as well. There is an element of you touching the dough and handling the dough, but you're not kneading it. You're doing what's called folding and pulling it. And I'll show you what that process is. All right. So if you have a look at my dough, it's all chunky and shaggy and whatever. I'm still going to handle this and touch it because I want to make sure that some of those bits at the bottom are being picked up. So again, this recipe is not about kneading, but in the beginning, I do want to just kind of pull it together, make sure that if there's any chunky bits of dough that they're picked up, that everything from the bottom is picked up. As I said, this is quite a deep dish from my stand mixer. It's not necessarily sort of lower, so I do just like to make sure that, you know, everything is picked up. So this is a good opportunity as well for me to feel the dough, make sure that there's no clumpy bits. See how there's this clumpy bit? I don't want that to stay that way in the dough because it's going to come out and be a really yucky floury bit and not nice. So I do that. Again, just wet my hand. It doesn't matter if your hand gets a little bit wet if you need to handle it. Again, break up the little bits. Make sure that there's none in the middle of the dough. This is just about making sure all the flour is picked up and is incorporated. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Now this is without salt. I haven't added the salt in here yet. I'm going to do that in the next part of the process. So the next part of the process, which I didn't sort of allude to, is this recipe. As I said, you don't need it with your stand mixer. I did try last week in the bake that I made to do it with the stand mixer, just to kind of help break up some of those floury chunks that were in there. It's good, but you still have to use your hand, so you might as well just do it in this way and it works just as well. And also, as I said, it's not one where you need fancy machines, this recipe. This recipe, the process actually, if you have this book, explains how to do the folds, and also talks to you about the importance of developing the gluten. So the way that you develop the gluten in this recipe is by doing the folds. Now the fold technique is using, let's say this is ready to go, but I'll show you this later anyway. So using your dough, you start to pull up from the outside, pull up the dough and fold it over. Turn, pull up and fold. Turn, pull up and do that. The beginning part of this process, after you've put the dough together, so this is the first part of the process, after you put the dough together, that's the next step. Now you have to do at least 3 of those. The book states every half an hour over a period of 2 hours, so at least 3 of those. So what will happen now is I will put my timer on my phone for 30 minutes and leave this on the bench. And obviously I still haven't added my salt. When I come back to do the first lot of folds, I'll actually put the salt in and incorporate the first folds. Now the trick with the folds is, and you'll feel this, the trick with the folds is to pull up until you feel resistance and drop back. Pull up until you feel resistance, drop back. When you've done usually 1.5, I've personally found it's about 1.5 rounds, you start seeing that instead of being able to stretch the dough up like this, it only goes here. That's the sign that the gluten is developing. When you get to that sign, you can feel that tension in the dough, leave it. Finish your round, leave it, okay? I do 2 rounds per, 2 rounds and 4 folds. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Think of if this was a corner, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and usually by that point it's done. At the end of the fold period, you put the lid back on, put your timer back on for 30 minutes, and off you go. You need to do that 3 times, okay? And I'll show you at each step how it develops. Obviously, now, see, the dough cannot be stretched. The dough has just been put together. This is why this recipe and this technique is so good, because, as I said, you don't need fancy machines to do it. You don't need fancy hooks. Even if you don't have one of these, like one of these, that doesn't matter. Pull it together with your hands. That first part that I was doing with the dough hook, you don't need anything fancy to pull this together. So this is also advantageous if you are off-grid or, for example, camping somewhere and you're not going to have access to your usual stuff. You can still whip up an amazing loaf of bread, homemade bread, and put it together without needing anything fancy for it. So we're gonna come back in half an hour. I'm gonna put the lid on this, put my timer on, and come back in half an hour and show you the next part of the process. Okay, I'm coming back after half an hour. This is what the dough looks like. No rise, it's not supposed to rise a lot. It definitely feels soft. Now I'm adding the salt and I'll show you how I pull it together. At this point in time I eyeball it because I've done it so many times, but the recipe says 21 grams. So once you get comfortable, yes, eyeball it, but until then, don't. Alrighty, let me take this out. So wet your hand again. Now I've just sprinkled that there, and I'll tip this to the side so you can see. See how it's a little bit more elastic than what it was when we first pulled it together? This is how it's going to look when you do the fold process. So again, pull up. See how that's starting to tear? That's showing resistance. That's showing resistance. So that means, for this turn, you're done. Because I've added salt though, just now, I am going to smush it just a little bit more just to make sure it does get right in there. Again, this is one of those steps where, you know, you can either add salt now or add salt at the beginning when you do your yeast. It doesn't matter because I'm showing you the way the recipe says. I'm adding it now. But if you wanted to add it, you know, when you add your yeast, that's also fine. Alrighty. So that's how it looks. See how soft it is and wet. It's very wet, it's very sticky, but see, it's not going on my hands. So we will come back again in half an hour and do this process again. We are back. This is the second time we're going to do this. Timer's just gone off. Let's have a look at how it looks. You can already see that it's a little bit gassier to the touch. Beautiful, and it's starting to rise. See that nice long stretch? Pull, stretch, pull, stretch. Getting a bit of resistance already. See? Again, it is a very wet dough, as you can see, but my hand is not dirty at all. Now there is another technique. I don't do it, but there is another technique where you go with both hands, lift it up in the middle and then plop it down. If you feel more comfortable using that technique, go for gold, but I find this one's probably just as good. It has now been about an hour. I already did the third fold and turn. I just wanted to show you how much it's risen. So in the meantime, it has warmed up a little bit over here. It was about 22 degrees C this morning when I started, which is still warm, and it would have been fine. It would have still risen at that kind of temp, just probably a little bit slower. It's now warmed up more to about 28 C, and it's warm in the house. I've just only now put the air conditioner on, but I want to show you how much it's risen and sort of what the next steps would look like. Okay, so this looks like it's probably doubled in size at this point in time. This mix, this bread recipe is known to like come right up to the top, especially on very, very warm days. It just keeps rising and rising and rising. So that is about an hour after the last fold and turn, and it's looking fantastic. See, it's very, very soft. Still sticky, which is supposed to be that way. So from this point, what I generally tend to do is let it rise. If I need to bake it in a hurry, so let's say I've started this process in the afternoon and I want to bake bread that night, it has worked. The recipe has worked. I have done it that way and gone from dough to baking within a couple of hours of starting the process. So yes, you can do it that way if you are in a hurry for bread. Generally what I do though is I get this ready and I let it rise for about 5 to 6 hours. I usually start first thing in the morning, so that sort of mid-afternoon I can put it on to bake, and then I've actually got, you know, fresh bread for dinner if that's what we want. Oftentimes I do make, you know, the bread and then we end up having the bread for dinner. We have eggs, bacon, you know, something like that instead. So in this instance though, I'm going to let it probably go till this afternoon when it cools down and bake it then. The other fantastic thing about this dough is, let's say you have left it for your 5-6 hours and something comes up and you think, oh my God, I can't bake this bread right now, I have to bake it tomorrow. Chuck your lid on, put it in the fridge, let it cold retard. It will slow down the the dough rising. It'll still rise, but not as much, and then you can bake it the next day. If you're going to do that, I would recommend taking the dough out at least an hour, but maybe even more, from the fridge before you're ready to bake. I've just found that it's better when it's more at room temp, a lot more pliable and easier to work with, and also has a better rise in the oven, because that's still going to rise. Once you work through it and shape it and put it in the Dutch oven to actually cook, it's still going to need a rise actually in the Dutch oven. So you don't want it to be condensed and not airy and fluffy. So if you do need to cold retard it, which is leaving it in the fridge overnight, make sure it's at room temp before you start baking the next day. Here is another quick update. This is about 2.5 hours later now. So it's doubled significantly. You can see here, that's a nice little air bubble. And there's going to be quite a lot of air bubbles that are going to start popping up now. Okay, we are now at the shaping end of this process. So about half an hour ago, I turned the oven on to 250°C, let that warm up. I'll show you now this nice big poofy mess that we've got, and how I'm going to shape it. As you can see, this has risen significantly. Now you can see all those beautiful air bubbles in there. We don't want to pop too many of them, but we do need to pop some, just to make sure that we can work with the dough. So what I'm going to do now is lightly flour my surface, spit this out, and divide it into 2 halves. One half is going to be a boule, and the other half is going to be made into some small rolls. Okay. So I've actually used all my flour up. All I've got left is a little bit of this Brero rye, which I normally use for my sourdough. When I'm doing sourdough, I mix a little bit, tiny little bit of it with my bread. So that's all I've got. It's not going to be any issue though. Use whatever you can. I've used potato flour once because I was desperate. Alrighty. Now let's hope for the best. I have no doubt that this will turn out. I've done this many, many times, and I do this weekly. Once you get into the habit of making bread, and particularly of making this bread, you'll just find that you can't not make it. You can't eat regular bread ever again. Alright, so excuse my shoulder for being in the way. Oh, where did I put that? So I, again, eyeball this. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's just for me and my husband. So what I do is flour it generously. I degas it. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Yep. I just gently degas it. And this is the fun part. Now, the way to shape the boule is, this is the way I do it anyway. If you're a professional baker, you might have a much better technique to do this. I don't. This is how I do it, so I'm showing you my process and how I do it. And this is the best way and the easiest way to develop the tightness and to ensure your bread remains taut on the outside. So what I do is I just grab corner over corner, corner over corner. You can see it's already starting to get a little bit tight. Corner over corner. You pull it all together, and then you turn it over. So that is how you shape your boule. Okay? Now I've started doing this. Professional bakers can kind of do this, you know, in a much better fashion. I'm not a professional baker, like I'm just, you know, your home baker, but I do this all the time. But it's good to, just put this around, it's good to be able to cup, so cup the base of your hand around and turn. And just keep doing this and just develop that tautness. See how I'm doing that? So that's how you shape. Now the same applies if you're going to do rolls. Divide this into equal pieces. I'm only doing this by approximation. Again, if I want them to be a specific, you know, amount, you know, if it's for burgers or something, then I will weigh them. If I'm making burgers, I tend to stick to around 150 grams, if that's the process I'm going to do. So hopefully you can see this. Again, fold, fold, corner over corner. Just keep pulling. Corner, 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 corner. And then once it gets taut, bunch it up, turn, tuck, 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 tuck. Press down. I'll show you again. So we've got 2, 4, 6, we'll get 8 rolls out of this. Perfect. These are really nice dense rolls as well. So pull, 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 pull. Develop the tautness. That one's going to be small, but that's okay. Now your hands will get sticky, that's okay. If you need to flour your surface again, do so. So this circling technique, that's something I've been playing with recently. Again, fold, 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 fold each corner. Fold each corner. Until it's a nice taut ball on the other side. Flip. So with rolls, I do like to press them down. They will rise. You're going to let these rise. You're going to bake the, if you're doing it like this, where you're doing boules and rolls, I'll bake the boule first because I do it in the Dutch oven. And in the Dutch oven, you do it with the lid on and lid off. Whereas with these, you can keep them on an open tray. And that's pretty much it as it relates to shaping. Shaping is just as important as any other element, and this is why I believe that this bread recipe is so good for beginner bakers, because it's very forgiving. You don't have to worry about managing the starter and making sure that the starter is alive. You've got the yeast there, which will give you that, you know, that rise that you need, you know, so it's kind of foolproof, right? Which means that you can really focus on the technique of doing the folds and doing the shaping. And believe me, the shaping is just as important as any other part, because if you don't shape your doughs properly, like any of these, the boules or the rolls, if you don't shape them properly, it's just going to end up all, you know, chopped all over the place. It's just going to be bits all over the place. So This is why I love this bread recipe. This is why I recommend that book to everyone. This is why I tell people to practice this. Alrighty. Okay, now that I've shaped everything, I've shaped the ball, shaped these rolls, and lightly floured them, I'm going to put a clean cloth over them, let them sit for probably sort of 10-15 minutes because I only put the oven on a little while ago, maybe even 20 minutes. What I do, because I'm not going to be using a colander or banneton to keep it shaped in there, I'll just reshape the ball before I put it in the Dutch oven. If you were making both balls, shape it and you pop it in your banneton or your colander lined with a tablecloth so that you can actually pull it out and it's the same shape. But anyway, even when I do that, I like to tuck the corners over again and just reshape it, make sure it's nice and taut, to make sure that, you know, when it does actually, you know, bake, it's got that nice beautiful shape and has those nice bubbles on the side to develop, you know, to release all that gas and develop that crustiness. So as I said, ball's going first because it needs to go for 30 minutes covered in the Dutch oven and then 18 minutes uncovered. The rolls will not, because they'll go for about 15 minutes on the same temp, but they don't need to be covered. So I'm just about to score the ball, and I wanted just to show you with two different things. So we've got a lame and we've got scissors. Scissors I'll show you first because it's easy. Now, I'm not like a fancy, I don't do fancy designs or anything. I just cut the hole, let the steam out, off you go. All right, so this is one really, really useful design technique. These will puff up. It looks really nice too. And then you've also got this technique. You can find heaps of tutorials on YouTube if you want to see, you know, how people do some specific designs or whatever it might be. So I like to sort of do the first cut and then cut into it a little bit more. Alrighty. Now you don't need to use oil for this at all. As long as you do I line my my Dutch oven with wax paper. But that's just because I like to do it that way. Pop it in. I've floured the surface again as well. And that's it. Alrighty, now we're ready for the oven. So pop the lid on, 250°C, I'm not sure what the Fahrenheit is, I'll link it in the description below. 30 minutes, then take the lid off and cook it for another 18 to 20 minutes depending on how brown you want it. So I'm going to pop this in and we'll catch you a little bit later. Where's Siri? I've got to find Siri! The 30-minute timer has just gone off. I have taken the Dutch oven out and I want to show you what the bread looks like at this point. Can you see that? Now see that on the right hand side is where I cut with the lame, and on this side is where I cut with the scissors. Okay, so our timer is up in a minute, just under a minute, but we've just lost power. So that was unexpected because I can't bake the rolls yet, but that's okay, I will get to them. With a minute left anyway, this is now ready. So I'm going to take it out and show you what it looks like and get it ready to put on the cooling rack so that it can cool. Be careful, buddy, be careful. Now, look at that. hot. Look at that. The underneath. The side. That's the top. Obviously this V looking stuff is where I did the scissors, and this on this side is where I did it with the lame. So just to show you two different sort of ways that you can put a design on there. Now another way, or one way that you can sort of confirm that your, can you hear it pop? Hear that pop? That's all the little gas bubbles. Another way that you can tell if you're, or sort of make sure that your bread is ready, is that it's going to feel sort of even weight. If it feels heavy at the bottom, it means it's not cooked properly and you may have an issue there. So once you sort of get into the process of making bread a lot more, you're gonna have mistakes, you're gonna have mess ups. That's totally fine. You wanna have mess ups so that you can understand, you know, what's going on. But essentially, that's another really, really good way to make sure that your bread is good to go. How amazing does that look? Artisan bread. So I'm going to put this on the cooling rack. Hopefully our power comes back because it's about 30 degrees C and I had the aircon on and it's really hot. But I am going to come back once I get the rolls loaded. All right, see you soon. The timer just went off. Thankfully the electricity came back, so I did manage to get the little rolls in, and I'm gonna whip them out and show you now. I'm so excited. So this recipe I've made it a gazillion times. I've put it in a Pullman pan, I've put it in a sheet pan to make pizza, I've done boules, I've done everything. I've never done little rolls though from it, so I only started making little rolls last week. Yeah, last week? Yeah. So let's have a look at them. Oh, now mind you, I didn't egg wash these. You can egg wash them, that's no problem. The other thing I found as well, when you make them in rolls, it's really, really good, especially if you freeze them straight away. So once they cool, if you're not going to eat them, freeze them straight away, and you can pull them out individually as you need them, you know, a couple of days later, and they'll still have that same nice, soft, you know, chewy outside, you know, holy in the middle, but still firm enough to hold sandwich toppings. It'll have that same texture. So obviously this doesn't have any preservatives in it. You know, you're gonna get tops 4 days, 3-4 days tops out of this bread before it starts to turn. The other thing I found as well is if you're in a warmer climate, like I'm in Queensland, like southeast Queensland, so it's subtropical, we do tend to, you know, particularly in this type of weather now, it does tend to spoil a little bit quicker. So what I tend to do, if I know, like this kind of a loaf, we would, for example, for dinner, we'd eat half of that for dinner. We'd make some eggs, you know, we'd have some olives, you know, paprika, that kind of stuff. Like we'd just have like a mezze plate with this bread, and then we'd eat the other half, you know, over the next couple of days. But if I, let's say, made 2 boules, what I do is I cut them in half and I chuck them in the freezer, because between Serge and I, we only eat sort of, you know, a half every couple of days for us. So 2 boules for us usually lasts us a whole week. Except for last week when he just decided he was hungry all the time. And I had to make bread for 3 bloody times. All right, let's get these rolls out because I'm gas bagging for nothing. Oh, dude. Oh. Okay, I'll take them out, I'll take them out. Look. Look. I mean, oh, they are super light. I'll just grab this middle one, because it's quite hot. Perfect size. I mean, this you can use, you know, fill it with burger fillings, a nice sandwich. You can see the little speckles because I've used Brero rye flour. You can see the little speckles. But yeah, super lightweight, and they're great, like, especially if you make them this size. Great for sandwiches, great for like even breakfast sandwiches. They're fantastic, and the advantage of these is you can pop them in individually in a bag and then just pull one out the night before you need it. You know, especially if you're not a big bread eater, or, you know, if you're like me, you just eat a little bit. So yeah, So that's them in rolls. Yeah. So now I'm just going to quickly put them on the rack to cool so that we can eat them later. So there you have it. Look at that. Look at those beautiful rolls. Look at that. I mean, look at it. How beautiful does it look? It's light. It's fluffy. You can see. It's super soft. And then, of course, this baby, this beauty. Oh, nothing better than homemade bread. Nothing. So there you have it, folks. That is my bread making process, and that is how I bake bread every single week. So if anyone turns in and says to you they don't have time to make bread, it's a crock of shit and it's a lie, because I just proved how easy it is to make bread. You don't need special equipment. You don't need special ingredients. You can do everything with stuff that you've got at home. And you know, it's not labor intensive, so you know, you can sort of kick it off in the morning and carry it on at the end of the day. Or if you don't feel like it, if you want to bake the next day, you can do that as well. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I'm definitely going to be planning a lot more videos coming up now. We've got a few outside projects going, and we've got some other projects that we're doing. I hope you enjoyed that video. Enough rambling from me today. I hope you enjoyed that video. I really hope you get some confidence and feel confident and try to make this recipe. If you have any issues, if you have any concerns, feedback, whatever, please let me know. Send me a message, you know, on any of the socials. It's Life on Marlowe's Farm, like everywhere basically. And yeah, I'll be happy to chat with anyone about this. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, comment, share, all that kind of stuff, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.